We have Jayashree Anand Gajjam, who is going to be speaking instead of Yamuna. And after her, we'll resume with the regular program because she has to leave early, so we are accommodating her. To tell you about her, Dr. Jayashree Anand Gajjam is working as an assistant professor at the Center of Excellence for Indian Knowledge System, IIT Kharagpur from May 2002. She completed her PhD from IIT Mumbai in 2021. Her expertise lies in Sanskrit grammar and philosophy of language. She's exploring the topic of phenomenology of language. And she's going to be talking about Upanishadic pedagogy. Welcome. So for tea and then continue as usual.
Respected Nagaraj ji, Sahana ji and Srinivas ji, thank you for offering me an opportunity to present my paper today. Distinguished speakers Shripal ji and Shastri ji, right after Shastri ji's talk, I feel a little anxious to present my paper. With very little intellect that I have, very little experience and expertise, I proceed with my topic, the Upanishadic way of pedagogy, ideas derived from the Guru Shishya Parampara embedded in the Chandogya Upanishad. So before I start, in 2 minutes, I'd like to give the background of this research. So it started with the foreign Mahatmya. So in 2020, I took an online course on intellectual humility offered by the Department of Philosophy, University of Edinburgh. And the construct of intellectual humility basically states that like it is a virtuous mean between intellectual arrogance, which is described by the haughtiness, bragging off, showing off, fanaticism, dogmatism, and intellectual self-diffidence or servility or timidity or lack of self-confidence. So it is a mean between both, which is like proper assessment of one's noetic strength and weaknesses. Now, after taking that course in 3 parts, theory, science, and practice, I realized that this is what we were taught in family. And then I was motivated to create one. After 6 months, I joined IIT Kharagpur, and I was interacting with young people. And just like having 10, 12 difference of age between them, I realized that there is a lot of different values have changed, and their body language and the way they address to teachers and the entire disposition to study a subject, everything has changed. So I was motivated to create one intellectual humility Vidya Vinaya program for Indian children, parents, and teachers. And as a start, I wanted to explore the literature that we have and derive insights from there. So I started with Upanishad. I started with Chandogya Upanishad, being the earliest after the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So this pedagogy in the Chandogya Upanishad is a side product of it. It is not the main aim while I was reading Chandogya Upanishad. Simultaneously, I was taking faculty development program for teaching and learning, pedagogy, and andragogy, which is teaching and learning to adult students. So based on that, this small research is there. So I will skip what are the Upanishads and what is the Guru Shishya Parampara for the time being. Just now we have the very lively session with the insights on Guru Shishya Parampara. I just wanted to focus on the last sentence, left-hand side. Upanishad by etymology means sitting near down at the feet of Guru to let go of one's ego so that you attain the highest knowledge of supreme truth or self-actualization or self-realization. That cannot happen with reading alone. So Guru is the inseparable part of this tradition and which was happening orally. So you have to just sit there and listen to it. And there are different ways in which Upanishadic knowledge was imparted, which is the topic of presentation today. So these are the 12 stories that I have taken from the Upanishads. Yesterday we have seen how storytelling has lots of value in Indian pedagogy. For today's presentation, I'll focus on only 2-3 main stories from it to explain these 7 methods that I have found in the Upanishads. Let's see, first is analogical method, where comparison is drawn between two things. One is the known thing, other is the unknown thing. So to explain the unknown thing, known thing is discussed, similarities are drawn, comparison is made, and peculiarities are focused on to explain the unknown thing. For example, in Shvetaketu Uddalaka Samvad, the son and the father duo, which will be explained more in a detailed manner in tomorrow's Upanishad session, the father Uddalaka gives the analogies of a honey hive where a particular part of honey loses its individuality, where it is coming from, which flower it is coming from. The rivers going into the ocean lose their individuality, and the tree, even after cutting its branch, still stays alive. So similar to that, the Brahman is all pervading. The difference is Nama Rupa. The terminologies are different, but the essence is one and the same. So that is the analogic method, which is all pervading. Max Miller and MacDonald have criticized this method. They say that the analogies in the Upanishads are far-fetched and etc. But that is the way, prominent way, like it is a praman. Analogy is a valid praman in our philosophical method. Synthetic method is the mental combination of different parts of one integrated whole. So usually it is said that we do not approach that paravidya with the parts. Usually we go to the source of the knowledge and we understand paravidya as an integrated whole. But with a very bala buddhi, it is very necessary to first give them the knowledge of the parts, then make the synthesis of it, and then go to the higher level. That we find in the story of 6 sages who are married, adept in the Vedas. They approach Uddalaka for the knowledge of the Atman, the pervading Atman, Vaishwanara Atman. And Uddalaka himself, being the very learned person, he sends them to Ashwapati. Ashwapati, go to them because he has the experiential knowledge of it. So I cannot be the good teacher for you to talk on Vaishwanara Atman. And Ashwapati, what he does is, he asks 6 sages, what do you meditate on? So someone says, I meditate on eyes, nose, head, etc. He explains Vaishwanara Atman in that way. So eyes of the Vaishwanara Atman is the sun, his breath is the sky, and his apaha, water, is the bladder, and Prithvi are his feet, 6 different varieties. And then he gives the idea by the synthesis, method of synthesis to all of them. And same can be considered as a collaborative or cooperative method, the last one, where there is another story where 6 senses are fighting. They approach their father Prajapati, who is greatest among us, and each sense, Prajapati asks them, you leave the body one by one and then you decide. Collaborative and cooperative learning. I'm coming to the modern pedagogical method where we can inculcate this in our education system. And when each sense is leaving the body, Shrotra lives, still the body sustains. Mana lives, still the body sustains. Nose lives, still the body sustains. But when prana starts living, everything is shaken, and then they decide that it is the prana which is the greatest. The collaborative and cooperative learning, which is the group activity that we conduct in classes. And also here, one embedded, inherent lesson that we learn is the respectfulness. We do not know yet who is greatest, but we are giving equal chances to everyone to talk. And we are earning same respect when we are talking. So that respectfulness, everything that comes under intellectual humility characters. Now, monologic method stands in contrast with synthetic method, where conversation is happening. There is dialogic method, there also conversation is happening, like Shvetaketu Uddalaka. Monologic method is only monologue by the teacher, which is based on proper instruction, where there are 2 stories that can be characterized here. Satyakama, when he is talking to his Shishya Goshruti, who has completed 12 years of study already. Now there is no need to give analogy, etc. Monologue se, with monologue, everything can be taken care of. So he just tells a story of the breath and the speech the conversation between the breath and the speech, where speech is telling the breath that your food is anything that is edible in the world and your clothes are water. So having water right before and after food is for the purification method, and some other small narrations that are happening around it. There is no conversation at all coming out of the mouth of the Goshruti. Entire conversation only Satyakama is talking. Personalized or ad hoc method. Ad hoc is the word used by Ranade in his selected Upanishads book. So personalized is individual based, and I personally think that this method pervades everything else. If a students want some knowledge based on that student, his learning capacity, his depth in that knowledge, and the time and the need, objective of the teaching, we can change the method of teaching. So personalized or individual teaching is there. So I will take 4, 5, and 6 with one story of Indra Prajapati. So in the story, Indra, the lord of the gods, and Virochana, the leader of the demons, approach their father Prajapati to get the knowledge of the Atman. And Prajapati asked them to stay with me for 32 years, then I will tell you. And both of them followed the Brahmacharyatva. And after the end of 32 years, Prajapati tells them that whatever you see in the pupil of the eye, that is the Atman. So they go and see in the mirror and the pan of the water, and they understand that this body, adorned, clothes, this is the Atman. And Virochana gets very excited. He goes back to the demon, and they are involved in eating and nourishing this body. But Indra is not satisfied. So Indra comes back to Prajapati, says that, no, this is not satisfactory to me. So please give me more knowledge about this. Prajapati asks them, stay with me for 32 more years. At the end of 32 years, he says that what moves around in the dreams, that is Atman. Then again, Indra goes back and comes back that this is not satisfactory because Atman cannot suffer what is happening in the brain. So that is not real. Then he says that stay with me for 32 more years. And again, then Indra follows that and says, this is also not satisfactory. Then Prajapati says, what is there in the deep sleep? So coming for wakefulness, dream, and then deep sleep, that is Atman. Still not satisfactory. Then with 3 aphoristic sentences, Prajapati tells him that Atman is the embodiment of everything. It is the essence. It is manifested in all the things, and it is substratum of everything. We cannot understand it just by reading. Only with the penance and the austerity and the meditation, one can attain and realize that knowledge. So knowledge realization, experience inducing method, which can also be found in Shvetaketu Uddalaka Samvad of Bhrigu Varuni Vidya, where Shvetaketu is asking, how can I realize this after merely knowing this? That is important in the entire Indian pedagogy. So I will move to the next slide, where this is like for the modern teaching method. So necessity of a guru is still there to not just to teach the subjects topic by topic, but to motivate or inspire students about the importance of that topic. So we have to take the students at that level where they can read theories on their own and understand. We just have to inculcate the motivation for that topic. And so the entire concern of Indian pedagogy, here Indian pedagogy differs with the Western method of pedagogy, where the concern of the teacher is with the subject or the knower, the student, rather than the object. What is to be taught, that comes eventually, but preparing him 12 years right after his Upanayana, where he leaves his home, his mother and father, and the guru becomes the father, and teaching he considers as his duty, dharma. That I think we have to inculcate. Institutional rules and regulations will come later, but the student in front of me is more important. So I will conclude my presentation with this topic, that infusion of righteousness, that is the important objective, should be the important objective of a teacher. And personalized teaching is difficult in current classroom scenarios. Right after we get into the class, we have 300, 500 students in front of us. But small assessments, group activities, personalized questions oriented to students, and identification of a problem, exactly what they haven't understood, and tackling it. And after the assessment, evaluation, feedback, and relearning, a small sessions to the weaker group of sections that should be done. We can ask them to document their observations in daily life and consider it. So each student should be the institution in himself. That should be the motto. And holistic development of the student should be there. So these are the characteristics that come under the intellectual humility term. Humility. So there is a direct narration before the Indra Prajapati Samvad. Even Shankaracharya's commentary also mentions that Indra approached Prajapati with all the humility of the student. Samit Panihi, Samidha in his Panihi, all the humility of the student. And in the beginning of his commentary on Chandogya Upanishad, Shankaracharya says that faith and austerity are the necessary adjuncts of meditation and Brahman. And there is direct narration of pedagogy also with before the story of Raikva and Janashruti. Raikva is a cart puller, Janashruti is a king, Kshatriya king, and he is renowned in his kingdom by the charity he performs. Now some Hansa, swans are speaking that Janashruti is nothing, like Raikva is greater in charity than Janashruti. He knows the language of the birds. Then he goes to Raikva, please impart me, why are you so happy? I'm doing so much charity, but I don't feel that happy. Then Raikva sends him back. Janashruti again comes back and with some offering to the Guru Raikva, and then Raikva tells him that give, but with not pride, take no vanity in your charity. And there also a sentence which is explicitly mentioned that I am impressed with your sincerity and persistence. So these are the qualities that a student should have. And before this story, Shankaracharya says that this story has been introduced for the purpose of making the teaching easily intelligible, and also for the purpose of laying down the procedure by which the teaching is to be imparted and received. So another qualities are pursuit of knowledge, need for cognition or cognitive closure, curiosity, inquisitiveness, then open-mindedness and open to learn or experience. Like Shvetaketu performs lots of experiments with his father, having 100% faith in him. Independence of intellect and ego. Janashruti going to Raikva, in Brihadaranyaka, Janaka going to Yajnavalkya. Here also Uddalaka, the Brahmin sage, learned sage, going to Pravahana Jaivali, who is the Kshatriya king. So everywhere we see that more importance is given to the epistemic advancement than one's own status. And that, I think, is important.
2 minutes more.
Yes, ma'am. So last slide is not showing. I mentioned that it is also resembles with the modern NEP objectives, holistic development of students. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's wonderful. And I was just reflecting that all this teaching was for such a deep knowledge. It was for self-awareness, for understanding the Paramatman. Whereas today, most of our pedagogy is for lower knowledge. It's not really directed towards higher knowledge. So we are actually discussing all this in the context of real higher knowledge, advanced knowledge. Whereas in today's language, that advanced knowledge that we talk about is something else. Those are just skills. We are talking about skills in today's times. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions, yes, I can see Nomesh ji at the back. Yes.
Insinuation that we have often leveled at us from people who may not believe in Indic thought, ideology, methodology, is whatever you do is sort of back mapped. So you look at something which the contemporary world is trying to do, and then we try to find, oh, this exists in our thing also, right? So we are continuously back mapping. Is there any example of what you saw in the Upanishadic way, the Upanishadic pedagogy, that does not do this back mapping, but tries to predict this is what can happen? This is not what exists right now. And if we do this, it might add a completely new dimension to how we do our education, pedagogy, methodology, living, everything like that. Any 1, 2 specific examples, if at all? If not, I think that is something worth pursuing.
Thank you, sir. I have not thought that way yet, but I think compassion of the teacher towards their student and some faith of the students towards the teacher. I think that is important than any other discussion. My students come to me and ask, इस चैप्टर में क्या इंपॉर्टेंट है, इसमें से कितने मार्क का क्वेश्चन आएगा, या फिर ये पूरा चैप्टर पढ़ना ज़रूरी है या नहीं. इट इज़ लाइक एंटायर orientation of them of learning subject has changed, and they have lost faith in teaching also. So I think these two things from teacher and student will help.
Sorry, give me just 1 minute. I don't mean countering necessarily the countering sense. They will have responses to that. They will, for example, say the Waldorf methodology does something beyond the regular classroom teaching, right? And that is for school kids. But you see, where I'm coming from is that maybe we need to, take this forward, compassion itself, for example, and say how this can be taken forward further rather than just saying, we are looking at compassion, which nobody else is looking at, right? It needs to go forward than that.
Meshji, what do you mean by going forward? I want to...
So for example, when I teach at IIT, I would like to teach in an Upanishadic way. So what does it exactly mean for me as a teacher at IIT or for any other teacher? So it's one thing to say we need to have compassion, but quite another to develop a design for pedagogy and education based on that. So we have a good starting point, great starting points. Our ancestors have done wonderful, wonderful things. And whatever we do will all be because of them only. I'm very clear about that. But we cannot stop there. Right? We need to take it forward.
So I had, it's sort of a little negative in the way, the connotation that I'm going to ask. Did you look at, or will you be looking at, are you looking at anything about Danda and the way, it can also be compassionate and enlightening at the same time. And, so maybe your thoughts on that?
I have a very preliminary reading on it, which starts from the Dharma Shastras, like a guru should hit a student if he does not follow some rules on the back, not on the head. The guru who hits on the head should be considered as a thief, and he should be punished in the same way that the thief is punished. That comes later in the later period. But before that, whatever the books I have read on ancient Indian pedagogy, never the Danda is mentioned as such. It did not come into my reading yet.
Yeah. I just want to add one point to what Nomeshji was asking. Our Panchakosha framework is very forward-looking. And if you see the whole Sandipani Muni ashram, the kalas and the vidyas which were taught here, actually map to that. And it is equally relevant even today, because these are all based on, the samagra, vikas of the person, and I think that is what you are maybe looking at, that how to implement it in today's day and context.
I think what the question what he asked earlier was a similar question that came yesterday also. That are we backtracking in the sense that in today's context we see all those, you have the 6 beautiful ways in which we saw the things, right? I think now we are trying to use the current pedagogy or methodology and trying to map that, okay, Rishis would have used that, etc. But I think the question is coming is, they themselves, how they actually went to that process is a little bit something which is kind of a discovery which we all have to go through it. But the important part is that every conversation by itself was to that context. In some rhetorical questioning was there, some in realization of tapas was there. So I think it varies from situation to situation and context to context. So one thing is that what you mentioned in the third part, to answer that, it was all individual experiential based. I think which is also part of NEP 4.6, that it should be a storytelling. That is the one thing which I can say, which relate. But otherwise, all other things, generally people will interpret more as a backtracking.
Correct, sir. So these things are based on the instruction process. Exactly. Before instruction, there were lots of things a Shishya has to perform before getting up before the sunrise, tending to the Guru's fires, Agnihotra, fetching that is entire thing is the education system. it is just like instruction किस तरह का होता था. But before that also and evening also, and so the poor students who could not like give any offerings to the teacher, they have to raise the subscription. All those things was the part of education.
Exactly. It's like this Guru Seva was the main aim, not to acquire knowledge, and knowledge was a byproduct of that, I think.
So the intimate relationship was there.
So thank you, Mohan, for this wonderful presentation. I could like understand how much in-depth reading you have done to come up with this framework. But actually, I would agree with Nomesh sir that we are actually going backtracking, and this personalized learning. This actually, if we see, this comes from, social learning frameworks, Montessori learning frameworks, that's very prevalent in West. But the actual, the core of the problem, and I would use Sri Aurobindo's terminology to explain this, in this framework, we are losing the spirit of the Upanishads. Let's say, if we use frameworks like Swabhava and Swadharma, pedagogical method using Swabhava and Swadharma framework, which directly comes from the Gita, then I think, we could better explain the forward-looking part that you are saying, or the way it was conceptualized initially, because I bit of feel, that spiritual element or the Purusa element, or you can say the Sakti element, misses in this kind of framework. But yeah, this has been a absolutely nice framework. So that's my observation. Yeah.
Ankurji.
Thank you. Namaste. It was a nice presentation. I also kind of agree with the comments that are being made here, that we often try to look for equivalents of Western frameworks in our texts, which I think is not really the approach that we should be adopting, at least now, given that we are taking Indic framework forward. What I would suggest to you is that when you're studying the educational frameworks in Upanishads, try to understand how cognition was done. What were the inner instruments of perception? What was the Antakarna Chatushtaya? You must be knowing about it. You are a Sanskrit student, so, right? So, because our approach should be to understand the Indic framework of education that is in the texts, not to look for humility and intellectual humility in these texts that you can find anywhere, okay? So that is just my suggestion to you. So because that is what Indian education framework is unique. What is the inner instrument of perception? How do you look at education? How cognition was done? What Upanishads have to say about it? So maybe you should focus on that. Just a suggestion for your own research forward. But thank you. I appreciate your.
It's very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a slightly different approach to this. My name is Sushruti Santanam. I'm a classical vocalist, Carnatic music, and I also study the history of Carnatic music a little bit, and of Indian music as well. Coming to this same question as a practitioner, when we learned Carnatic music, we were given two frameworks. One was called Lakshana, and the other was called Lakshya. Lakshana is what you learn from a guru as rules. There may be skills, there may be other forms of lakshanas, how you sit, how you hold yourself, and so on and so forth. Starting from food and the clothes you wear, everything was sort of listed for you, and you did not question it, you just followed it. But the other framework that we were allowed, Lakshya, included all of these things. And today what we hear in a performance as music actually in practice includes all these things within the framework of Lakshya, personally guided by the Guru. So there is a pedagogical framework in music that more or less sort of touches on all these aspects. So there is probably something there that you could look at. I don't know how it will map onto the teaching of science. I don't know how it will map onto the teaching of mechanical engineering. But the framework exists because music is a practice. There is, and tomorrow I'm going to speak about it, so we can take questions and have disagreements on this more tomorrow, but the framework exists, and I'm very excited by what she's doing because what she's giving is filling the framework for me.
Dr. Gajam, I echo Sushruti ma'am in saying that your presentation was in-depth, comprehensive and brilliant. I think there is a great deal of work that we should do on each Upanishad based on this, and not just restrict to the Upanishads but also spread over to the Karikas, the Tikas and so on. This was brilliant. And I think the focus that you're doing on intellectual humility is the key aspect, because that is where we are all lost. Like, all of the modern education is focusing on skill development, sans the human development, right? So I think your focus is actually exactly right. And I also believe that this comparison between Western pedagogy and Indian pedagogy is going to continue for another decade for sure. It's okay to say that we don't need Western frameworks and terminology, but till the moment Indic frameworks become a mainstream, terminology of conversation, we need this. So I'm going to take a slightly different stance. And for example, the 6 things that you identified, I think even though it might look like backtracking, we are actually identifying these locuses and saying that, these are areas where we can have cognitive studies, etc. happening at a later. So I really just want to appreciate the fantastic work. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, I just want to add one word since she has brought up vocabulary. Perhaps instead of Indic and Western, you could also look at para and apara vidya.
So Jayashree ji, you started a conversation. Absolutely. Wonderful.
Sahana ji, can I just, sorry, this is my last bit in this session, but I really, really appreciate actually. I've taken pictures. Yours is the only session where I've actually taken pictures of the slides. The idea was not to discard or, belittle whatever you've done. I was just trying to be, quote unquote, devil's advocate and try to sort of bring out what the other side is saying, because we see that all the time. I think this is a wonderful presentation. I often tell my students, we can clap also. I often tell my students the way forward for us is to not suddenly jump onto where we want to be. There has to be a trajectory. And, my sort of mantra to all my students, not that you are my student, I'm just saying in general, I often say this, that we need to first win the game and then change the game. We need to do very well what we do right now, what the rest of the world is doing, and then force people to sort of accept what we are saying, which will be transformative and completely new. Yeah. Thank you.
The other thing that I notice is that, we are looking at the written word constantly. So when we mine the Upanishads, we are looking at the words, trying to understand it and, find all those pedagogical tools. But I feel that there's a lot lost in translation. And because we are not seeing that lifestyle around that, just looking at the written word, I feel we are just getting a limited understanding, right? Yeah. You want to say something, Nagaraj? After this, we break for chai.
Yes.
But you want to say something about this whole conversation?
Yes. Just to Nomesh ji, I want to ask him, how many of his engineering teaching colleagues talk all this language? It is in your department that you are talking and you are aware that pedagogical discussions are happening. Let me tell you, my friend, no IIT professor or any engineering professor has a pedagogical training. They don't know this vocabulary. They might be adapting all these methods on their own. I remember from my anecdotal knowledge that Professor C.V. Raman, when he was teaching physics in his classes, he used to use all these Upanishadic methods. He used to go to the classroom, tell some story from Mahabharata and Ramayana, and used to tell that I am teaching you interference of waves. Okay, you come back. By evening, you tell me what is interference in this. Okay, so that, my friend, please don't tell me that they already did this. They do not know. None of these things are there. In higher education or higher professional education, pedagogical training does not exist at all. Catching up from Sushruti ji's word, para, apara, there is another word, vidya, avidya also. And avidya is not a bad word for us. Avidyaya mrutyum tirtva, vidyaya amrutam ashnute was the philosophy. Sahana ji started with that. She was saying that this is all applicable to vidya, not avidya. She did not use those words though. So actually, Ankurji, what she was doing was she was talking about the pedagogical methods in the pedagogical situations in the Upanishads. What you are suggesting is to take the cognitive knowledge and other knowledges and bring it to the pedagogy. So the two tasks are two different tasks. We consciously opposed this approach of bringing IKS into pedagogy. We were interested only in bringing pedagogical IKS that exists. That's what she was doing. So all admiration for her. Thank you very much.